during question answer session, all attendees will be getting e-certificate. But for us to do it smoothly, please fill up the feedback form which you will get at the end of the webinar. So let us not waste any more time and begin our session, for which I call upon my head of the department, respected Dr. Anjali Sabnis ma'am, to share her thoughts with us. Anjali ma'am, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Bhavna. Am I audible? Yeah.
Yes.
Respected Dean Sir, Dr. Dipti Shastri, Dr. Praveen Iyer, all the professors and head of different medical colleges across India, staff members of Department of Anatomy and other preclinical branches across India, and my dear colleagues, good morning everyone. I welcome you all for the webinar in Anatomy, Reflections and Blueprinting. We all are acquainted very well with CBME, that is competency-based medical education. And through CISP, we have implemented that for the first batch. So the first batch of first MBBS is over now, and we are waiting for the next to come. Now today's webinar topics, these are reflection and the blueprinting. Through the discussion, we'll get a lot of important information, and that will be useful for implementation for this new batch. To discuss this, we have very eminent speakers in this field, Dr. Dipti Shastri ma'am and Dr. Praveen Iyer. You must have heard both of them at various levels, at various occasions. I thank our respected Dean Sir, Dr. G.S. Narshetty Sir, to help and support for the organization for this webinar. And I thank my staff members, Department of Anatomy, MGM Medical College, Navi Mumbai. They work really very hard on this webinar. I have a good strength of 13 people in my department. One more professor, Dr. Pradeep Pawar. I have 4 associate professors, Dr. Lalita Chavan, Dr. Charushila Shinde, Dr. Bhavna Junagade, Dr. Mini. I have 3 assistant professors, Dr. Rekha Mane, Dr. Shantanu Malik, and Dr. Prakash Mane. I have one more tutor in my department, Dr. Sumi Elizabeth. So with this, I welcome you again for the webinar in Anatomy, Reflections and Blueprinting. Over to you, Dr. Bhavna. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for such welcoming words. It is time to begin our first session. And to introduce us to our first esteemed guest, I hand over now to Dr. Rekha Mane.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Dr. Rekha.
Okay.
I welcome all.
Start again.
Yes.
Ask whether they have heard.
Was I audible before this?
Dr. Rekha, you're audible.
Right now?
You are audible. Your screen is not seen. That's all.
Is my screen visible now?
Yes, your desktop is visible.
Is this screen visible?
Yes, yes.
I welcome all. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you our first speaker, Dr. Dipti Shastri ma'am. She is a professor in anatomy. To her credit, ma'am is also a deputy dean for Vinayaka Mission, Kripananda Variyar Medical College and Hospital, Salem, Tamil
Dr.
Nadu.
Rekha, sorry to disturb you, but again your screen is not visible.
Some technical glitch. Let me work it out. Is it visible now?
It is visible. Now it's gone.
Yes, visible.
Yeah, it is visible now.
Yes.
Ma'am held many respected positions in her institute like Curriculum Committee, Board of Management, Institutional Ethical Committee, Medical Education Unit, Social Media Champion. She is also a PhD supervisor and postgraduate guide. Ma'am is also a member of Board of Studies for Kerala University of Health Sciences and President of Association of Anatomists for Tamil Nadu. She is Editor-in-Chief for National Journal of Basic Medical Sciences. Ma'am is a founder member of Academy of Dental Education and Society of Clinical Anatomists. To her credit, ma'am has more than 32 publications nationally and internationally. She is a known resource faculty for CBME under MEU, India, Research Ethics, Faculty Induction Program and a Faculty Development Program nationally as well as internationally. She has guest lectured on many forums like bioethics, medical education and implementation of CBME. She has also won an award for Best Paper Presentation, Dr. M.M. Cooper Memorial Award for Teachers. To her certification, she has more than 13 certifications. To list few, it's the Health Accreditation Course and a Curriculum Design. Her key interest is in the medical education. On that note, I welcome Dr. Dipti Shastri ma'am to begin the session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Rekha. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
I
would like to share my screen. Can you please?
Yeah.
Can you please permit me to share my screen?
Stop sharing.
We have stopped sharing, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
You are panelist, so you can share the screen, ma'am.
Okay. Is my screen visible now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. At the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Anjali Sabnis, Professor and Head, Department of Anatomy, MGM Medical College, Navi Mumbai, for inviting me for this presentation. Mortui vivos docente. Can I have anyone in the audience to translate this phrase to us in English? You can unmute yourself and translate it or post in the chat box. I'm sure every anatomist worth his or her salt has come across this term. Nobody? Okay. I thought all of us were familiar.
The dead teaches the living.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Thank you so much. I thought all of us were. I thought all of us were familiar with this quote in Latin about the dead teaching the living. This is actually a classical quote which is used to justify dissections of human cadavers in order to understand the cause of death. It is generally used as a term in forensic medicine, but holds meaning as valuable in anatomy as well. I am Dr. Deepthi Shastri, and I'm going to take you for the next half an hour through a journey on Reflect on Death to Care for Life. If I can manage to get all of you to reflect on that fine day when you walk through the hallowed precincts of the dissection hall for the first time and where your first teacher, the cadaver, has taken you ever since. The objectives of my session are, at the end of the session, you will be able to discuss the importance of cadavers to teaching and learning anatomy, define reflection, enumerate a few reasons for medical students to adopt reflection in practice, describe ways in which medical students can reflect on cadavers, and frame rubrics for analysis of reflective writing. We all consider dissection hall as being a sacred place where the cadavers teach medical students the structure of the human body so that they can treat patients tomorrow with the knowledge that they have gained about the normal. Time for you to respond once again. Once again, this is a placard which adorns every dissection hall of every department of anatomy, I'm sure. Hic lucus est ubi mors, gaudet succerere vitae. If anyone knows its translation in English, I would like you to unmute yourself and respond, or again, put it on the chat box.
Hello.
Yes.
Death delights to bring wisdom to the living.
You're absolutely right, ma'am. The same placard adorns our dissection hall as well. Hic locus est ubi mors, gaudet succerere vitae, rightly means this is the place where death delights in helping life, or death delights to help the living. There's another very popular placard in dissection halls, which reads Tacient colloquia, effugiat rises, hic locus est ubi mors, gaudet succerere vitae. Does anyone know the first two sentences? Anybody? You can respond by unmuting yourself.
Let idle talk be silenced.
Right. You're right, ma'am. It literally means let conversation cease, let laughter flee, and then the rest is the same. This is the place where death delights to help the living. We anatomists uphold the sanctity of the precincts of the dissection hall and would like our students to do likewise. Can anyone identify this unique architecture? If you have been a fan of Dr. V. Balasubramaniam sir's picture postcards that he posts regularly on anatomy groups on WhatsApp, you would have recognized it in a jiffy. Anyone? You can unmute yourself and respond. Okay, no one? This happens to be the oldest surviving anatomical theater in the world, located in Padua, Italy, and built in 1594. This was just for trivia. I would like to quote William Harvey, who has said, "I learn anatomy not from books, but from dissections, not from the tenets of philosophers, but from the fabric of nature." The topic for today is reflect on dead to care for life. I would like to ask all you anatomists, what does dissection or cadaver mean to your students? I would like you to reflect and respond to this question. In what way are cadavers and dissection helping our medical students? Again, you can unmute yourself and respond or post on the chat box. Nobody wants to reflect? Then I'll move on.
Yes, ma'am.
Sure.
I would like to say a...
Please do, Dr. Seema.
Ma'am, I would like to say learning in the real world.
Yes, thank you. The students learn in the real world. I'll carry on. I'm sure all of you will agree with this. Dissection of the human body has been the mainstay of medical education for centuries. The dissected cadaver reveals the complexity of the human body to not just medical, but dental students as well as health sciences students. It helps develop technical skills of future surgeons and enables study of researchers. It enhances patient care methods, practicing physicians, and anatomical study and research enable clinicians to transform ideas into medical innovations and advancements. And ultimately, it benefits future generations. So cadavers. What do cadavers mean to us? I'll just tell you what one of the students reflected. Cadavers to students mean a group of teachers who are so special they leave a lasting legacy long after they go. What better time than the pandemic lockdown to make us, especially our students, realize the unparalleled experience of learning with the ubiquitous cadaver. I would like to quote one of the students from Yong Lu Lin School of Medicine, Singapore, who has said that even with advancements in technology and artificial intelligence, a heart can only be trained by another heart. A heart can only be touched by another heart. A student once said, "The body is the ultimate work of art, and dissection is of itself a creative expression." It's no wonder that the cadaver is revered as a silent mentor in Oriental countries. Every year, they conduct Thanksgiving ceremony to their silent mentors, just as we do. The term silent mentor was introduced and popularized by Zhu Xi University. Students of the university narrate they learned how in death the dead offer precious lessons about life and living. The erstwhile Medical Council of India has rightly published the AdCom document with a module 1.5 dedicated to the cadaver as a first teacher. Medical students enter college and their first and lasting encounter is with the cadaver. Hence, the MCI thought it necessary to introduce it into medical education. Respect for cadaver as a teacher translates later into respect for human beings as teachers and a lifelong respect for learning. Throughout the world, the emphasis is on humanizing the cadaver with respect as first patient or first teacher has gained momentum. The competency addressed by module 1.5 is that at the end of the module, the student demonstrates respect and follows the correct procedure when handling cadavers and other biologic tissues. The discussion at the end of the module has been directed to focus on the fact that some of the cadavers were unclaimed, but also many of them are anatomic gifts by families. And respect for donor families, cadavers, and tissues is important and must be respected. On day one, when the students begin dissection, it is a ritual for the Department of Anatomy to administer an oath of honor of the cadaver, called as the cadaver honor oath. I'm sure this is a common practice with medical colleges all over the country, just like ours. This is the oath that every student takes in our institution. I solemnly pledge to respect the cadaver and treat it with dignity as I use it for the pursuit of my medical education, to consider it a privilege to learn medical science through the selfless service of the donor of the cadaver who teaches me even after death, to be grateful to the person whose cadaver will always remain my first teacher, to honor this place where the dead teach the living, to ultimately serve humanity to the best of my ability by providing quality healthcare and promoting advancement of medical knowledge through teaching and research.
Audio is lost.
Can you not hear me, ma'am?
Now I can hear you, ma'am.
Okay, ma'am. Can I continue?
Yes, ma'am. Please.
I'm sure everyone got to read the cadaver honor oath. That is what I was reading.
Yes,
so I'll not repeat it. The students by this cadaver honor oath are sensitized to the fact that the cadaver is their teacher, and what they learn with its help will take them a long way in their medical career. I quote a philosophical take on dissection by a popular teacher of health sciences called as Jill Headley. Jill Headley coined the word somonaut. Like an astronaut who navigates outer space, a somonaut is a person who navigates the inner space of the body. Soma meaning body. He runs somonautic workshops which are dedicated to exploring inner space. And he says, and I quote him, dissection is an act of introspection. By unwrapping the layers of the donor gifts, participants, that is, students, uncover hidden layers of themselves. Jill Headley encourages students to look inside and feel and listen at many levels. In this integrated approach that he proposes, it is acceptable to notice and acknowledge our own feelings and reactions about the work we are doing. It is highly cooperative learning environment. We also note our relationship to the others who are present in the lab. The donor cadaver, the other students, and the instructors. If we can, at this point, recollect our own experiences as UG students, I would like you to remember the exhilaration of spotting a cutaneous nerve for the first time without inadvertently cutting it off, and sharing the misery of failing to identify a really large blood vessel pointed out by your table teacher. And what I'm going to say now has got nothing to do with the study of the cadaver, but the surreptitious glances across the dissection table, the slight flutter of the heartstrings, soon to be drowned by the weight of the intimidating viva voce. Memorable, right? I'll read out a few reflections by medical students all over the globe about dissection and studying with the help of Cadavers. One of the students reflects by experiencing the reality of death in a graphic way, the individual may feel the preciousness of life ever more keenly. One more student reflects, I feel more compassion for myself and for others. These are reflections by medical students. So what is reflection? I would like the audience to take this question. Please unmute yourself and respond or post on the chat box. What does reflection mean to you?
Yeah, Dr. Dipti ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Chopde from Nasik.
Yes, sir.
So I had remained as a professor in medical college and now I'm practicing consultant medical geneticist.
Yes, sir.
And the question, I'm here just to listen to you particularly.
Yes, sir.
Very special topic, and reflections, what I understand is the one who is standing beside the dead body in the dissection hall has to see himself in that dead body on the table, plus the sensations, feelings, emotions, thoughts and thought processes that he's having right now. Someday he is going to be there on the table. Right now he is not. And he has to get that difference. And by looking at that difference, he has to relate it to the life that he is going to deal with. People who are going to come to him with suffering, with disempowerment, with different kinds of sensations they can't bear, they can't, or they can't hold on to. So this is what I'm actually getting, and I'm for that here. That is what my understanding of reflection is.
Thank you so much, Chopde sir. That's beautifully put, and a philosophical bent of mind regarding feeling of, coming out of the body, kind of feeling also, and how feelings can be extrapolated to the patient's suffering and feelings as well. Thank you, sir. Yours was much more philosophical, but I'm going to give a very drab scientific definition of reflection. Reflection, as defined by Baud in 1985, is an intellectual and affective activity in which individuals engage to explore their experiences in order to lead a new understanding and appreciation. So what an individual does during the process of reflection is his affective domain is stimulated during this period. He explores his experiences, as Dr. Chopde just mentioned, in order to have a new understanding of the situation. As Sir rightly mentioned, how he can translate what he sees in the cadaver to the patients as well. What is the general aim of reflective writing? Here, again, I would like you faculty members to unmute yourself and respond. You've been engaging your students in reflective writing. So what is the aim of reflective writing?
Good morning, ma'am. I'm Dr. Hina Sharma.
Good morning, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm from Gitanjali Medical College in Udaipur, Rajasthan. And see, the reflective writing, what we want the students nowadays, now that we have started asking them to write that. See, the first thing is they will be, they know that they have to write a reflective writing. So they will probably listen to the lecture also, whatever is going on, whatever topic is being taught. And then in reflective writing, we expect them to first of all just look at the topic, whatever was being taught, and then we want them to see why has it been taught to them. So they have to think why it has been taught to them and how it is going to be of any use in future. So whenever a topic is being taught, so it gives a holistic approach towards the topic, and they can, by reflective writing, they can imbibe the topic in their daily life activities also. So that is the aim, I think, of the general aim of reflective writing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hina. You have nailed it. You said they write and they feel and they imbibe. These three words, I'm putting it in a different way. The aim of reflective writing is to assist students to internalize, as Dr. Hina said, to imbibe in their learning in both cognitive, she said, to write, and affective domains, they think. So the general aim of reflective writing is to assist students to internalize their learning in both cognitive and affective domains. What is the significance of reflective writing for medical students? Well, it would help them to develop as medical professionals. Reflective writing involves more than just describing their learning and development. It is important for them to analyze, evaluate their learning to show deeper reflection that is required in a medical course. They may explore their changing values and beliefs on continued reflection, and they may analyze the ideas of experts in the field of medicine in relation to their experiences. So not only do they reflect and analyze their own feelings, but they also get to analyze the ideas of experts in the field. This is the purpose of reflective writing in medical students. Reflection helps in the growth of cognitive process by improving critical thinking and clinical reasoning, and in the process, bridging the gap between theory and practice. This is one more significance of reflective writing in medical students. It hones their critical thinking and clinical reasoning and bridges the gap between theory and practice. Reflection can be practiced effectively by adopting the steps as described and illustrated by Terry Borton's model of 1970. Since all of you have been practicing reflective writing with your students, I would like you to share what are the steps in which you ask your students to reflect on. Again, you can unmute yourself and respond.
May I answer once again?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Dr. Yes. We ask the students to reflect in under three headings: what happened, so what, and what next. These are the three headings in which we ask them to reflect on the topic.
Thank you so much, ma'am. This is exactly the model of Borton, which has been modified by Rolf. So instead of what next, it's like so what and now what, okay, instead of what next. So reflection can be done after any activity along these lines. As Dr. Hina mentioned, what happened? What did you learn? So what? What are the applications of this learning? What next? What knowledge or skills do you need to develop so that you can handle this type of situation? Q questions can be reflected on and answered by describing the events with facts. What happened? By interpreting the event with lessons learned. What did the experience mean? By following up the event with future plan of action. What are the next steps? Now that we know how reflection can be done effectively, let's move on back to reflection on cadaver and dissection. I'm sure all the anatomy faculty encourage the students to reflect on the cadaver and dissection. And this could be done by using literature, theater, and art to explore aspects of professionalism and ethics with respect to the cadaver. In competency-based curriculum, these activities contribute to student development and ideally contribute to the development of humanely oriented physicians. We anatomists dedicate a time in the schedule of first MBBS to acknowledge the altruism of body donation, thereby encouraging students to reflect on death and dying. At this juncture, I would like to share our experiences in Vinayaka Mission's Kripananda Varya Medical College, Salem. Recently, on 4th of July, at the end of Module 1.5, we had Thanksgiving to the cadaver, our first teacher. This ceremony of Thanksgiving to the cadaver was reverently performed so that students' recognition and expression of gratitude for the sacrifices of the donors and their families and the unknown, unclaimed bodies can enhance an emerging sense of professional responsibility. The students were addressed by the head of the department, followed by sharing of experiences of the students. It was a consensus that they were immensely grateful to the cadaver and they would not let this knowledge go in vain. They also expressed their thoughts about their own will for donation of bodies for medical education. One of our students, Miss Megan Sarah Matthew, followed up the ceremony with her reflections on the same. I would have ideally asked her to come and do the presentation, but unfortunately, she has model exams in anatomy today, and so I present you her reflections. She reflected on the event of Thanksgiving as on the 4th of July, a batch went to the anatomy hall to pay respect to and give thanks to the cadaver from whom we learned most of our anatomy subject knowledge. We gave speeches to show our thanks and spoke about the importance about the cadaver that it had in our day-to-day study of anatomy. Our faculty had spoken to us about understanding why we have such a Thanksgiving service and also emphasized on the importance of donation of our body after death. What are the applications of our learning? She reflected, through this Thanksgiving service, we as first year students understood the value of the human body and the life that it has given to us. Our first teacher, the cadaver, although lifeless, taught us how to help the living by increasing our basic knowledge in the vast field of medicine. Though our cadaver had no life, we lived in our labs. He lived in our labs and in our minds every day. So in her reflection, she's spoken about how the faculty spoke about Thanksgiving to a cadaver, which is essential, and also the importance of body donation by the students themselves. And in what are the applications of her learning, she says that it helped her, though it was a lifeless body, about the basic knowledge in the vast field of medicine. And though the cadaver had no life, he lived in their labs and in their minds every single day. What next? The cadaver was a teacher who taught us more than the contents of our textbooks. Module to learn ethics, gratitude, bonding, and empathy. These lessons will improve our medical judgment and our relationships with our patients. I have a renewed understanding of the sanctity of life and of the complexity of the human body. I also have a deeper thought on the responsibility that comes with being a healthcare provider as I try to refine and fix this incredibly designed structure. So in her future plans, she says that she understood the sanctity of life and the complexity of the human body and has a deep feeling of responsibility of being a healthcare provider. Now, at this stage, I would like to know whether you teachers of anatomy assess reflections of your students. If you do, please respond by Y for S and N for no on the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and respond. Do you assess reflections of students? Do you think it is necessary to assess their reflections? Anybody? Do you all assess the reflections of students on early clinical exposure or self-directed learning? You must be asking them to note on logbooks. If you don't, it's fine. You can say you don't assess. Well, since there's no response, I assume.
Ma'am.
Yeah, sure. Tell me, ma'am. Yeah, please go on, ma'am.
Ma'am, actually on chat box, many people have responded and said
yes.
yes.
I could not see. I could not see on the chat box at all.
Many people have responded that they do assess.
Okay. They do assess. Okay. Yes. If anyone can share how they assess, they can unmute themselves. I'm unable to see the chat box. So if anybody can unmute themselves and respond how they...
Ma'am, at the end of the class or whatever, wherever we have to take the reflections, we ask them to write their reflections on a sheet of paper and collect it. And then whoever has taken the class, usually the teacher herself or himself goes through the reflections and just not necessarily reading every sentence that they have written, because it might become tedious with a batch of 250 students. So, but in general, we do get to know whether they are learning from this and whether they are actually benefiting from the classes that are going on.
Thank you, ma'am. Do you grade them?
No, we don't grade them, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, thank you for your
Hello,
response.
I'm Dr. Bhagya here,
yes,
Professor of Anatomy from RV Dental College, Bangalore. What we do is, we have a logbook. For a particular topic, we take the feedback, their reflections, and at the end of this academic year, we try to sort of, record the important points and try to compile. And on the whole, we get a sort of the batches perception. And we try to compare it with every year, the students of consecutive years. So that gives us some feedback as to how a particular batch fares about, in their understanding and their perception, and what are the changes. That's what we do.
Thank you for sharing your experience, Bhagya Lakshmi ma'am. I did notice in the question and answer session, like many have responded about yes. What I gather is that none of you are actually grading reflection. We are not grading reflection as well, but I would like to share a simple rubric. This rubric, which is very popular in the nursing field, is based on Gibbs reflective cycle, and it fits the bill of Borton's model as well. So instead of what happened in Gibbs cycle, they reflect on the awareness of experience. The students describe the event and their feelings about it. The next phase of reflection is understanding the experience, where they evaluate and analyze the situation and the impact on future actions. What next? That is conclusion and action plan. Now, if the student has not described anything, the student is scored 0. If it is incorrect or incomplete and complete and accurate, they are scored 1, 2, and 3. Evaluation and analysis, if there's no explanation, they score a 0. If it is insignificant, significant, or multiple significant, they get scored 1, 2, and 3. And conclusion and action plan, if there is no description, it's 0. Insignificant, brief, or extensive description, they get scored 1, 2, and 3. Now, this is subjective, and I'm sure the grading would vary with different examiners. And what I've gathered with all the discussions is that assessment of reflection is still a new concept in Indian context. And we have quite some way to move in this direction. World Anatomy Day. I'm sure all of you are familiar. This was celebrated on 15th of October 2020 in honor of Andreas Vesalius. On this day, our students commemorated dissection, cadavers, and anatomy by creating these masterpieces. And I think this is a great way of reflecting on anatomy, cadaver, and dissection. They not just created prose and pictures, but came up with delightful poetry as well. There was one on lungs, and this one is on dissection hall and cadaver. I would like to read this out. One of us. This was written by Aishwarya S., a first MBBS student, who wrote, "Dissection hall, the board outside marked in bold said, forceps in her hand, like a warrior with his sword, 5 brisk steps to her formalin-tainted, dark-skinned cadaver. He lay, arms supinated, his long fingers slightly abducted. A faint line above the scaphoid grasped her attention. She gasped. All eyes turned to her, but hers went to his half-open eyes. Again she looked, more intensely, tracing her fingers over it. 2 more lines in succession, fainter than the first. Was he successful? Did he lacerate his radial artery? She hoped not. She turned to her peers. Respect him, for he is one of us. I would like to summarize by saying that there is an emphasis on humanizing the cadaver with respect as first patient or first teacher. Reflection helps medical students in critical thinking and clinical reasoning and bridge the gap between theory and practice. For reflection, Wharton's model of reflection of 1970 is followed. The lines of reflection are what, so what, and what next. MCI module 1.5 states the cadaver as a first teacher, and this can be conducted right at the beginning by an ode to honor the cadaver and end with a thanksgiving. Reflection on it helps students to internalize the cadaver in their quest to learn about the normal human and ultimately correlating it with diseases and treatment. Rubrics for assessment can be devised with references available and validating it by practice. I would like to conclude by quoting John Dewey, who once said, "We do not learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on experience." I've always felt reverent towards the dissection hall. My oft-repeated lines to the students are, "This place is sacrosanct, a temple. Tread here with devotion. And come fall in love." Not the Karan Johar Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge line. It's come fall in love, as an anatomist would say, come fall in love with the cadavers. I would like to end by paying obeisance to my innumerable silent teachers, the first of whom I had the privilege to learn from in 1984 in Goa Medical College, and the last one of this morning, the tissues of which I held to assess the students' knowledge of anatomy. These are my references. I would really like to recommend Chong Sui Ann's Tribute to Cadavers, The Silent Mentors in Medicine. I'm sure all of you will enjoy reading this particular article. I can't wait to read this, what seems to be an interesting read, Stiff, The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers by Mary Roche. I would like to sign off by saying, cadavers, the first balance between life and death that a doctor encounters every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dipti Shastri ma'am. It was a very insightful, beautiful lecture, reminding all of us anatomists of the importance of cadavers once again. Now we are open to question and answer session, for which I hand over to Dr. Minimol. Thank you, madam. As it was an interactive session, most of the queries are already dealt with. But Dr. Asha Vijay, she wanted to say something. So we'll unmute her for the session.
Yes, ma'am.
Asha Vijay, for me. Please ask your question, Dr. Asha Vijay.
Good morning, ma'am. Hope I'm
Good
audible,
morning.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for the wonderful session. Actually, reflective writing was a what is it? A big mystery for us because we didn't know what to ask for. Reflection is just a subjective feeling, is what I thought, and students reflect on their feelings about what has been already told. And assessing this was, I thought it is not easy, and we couldn't do it. But thanks for giving us this, what is it, scoring rubric on assessment, which makes at least a part of it for assessing and what is it, compiling and what is it, recording these perceptions of the students year-wise, ma'am. So that it becomes easy for us to improve. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Assessment of reflection only, because I thought it was subjective and we couldn't do this.
You're absolutely right, ma'am. When we have 100 or 150 students, it becomes very difficult to assess the reflections of all students. Why I insist that assessment is important is, yes, it's the student's feeling. There's no right or wrong about their feeling, but you need to guide the student on the depth, the potential they have for reflection.
Yes.
The deeper they reflect, the better it is for them in clinical practice.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think we need to have more sessions on this reflective writing, because per se, I think we are not exactly clear what we need to reflect. Means it is regarding their attitude, their perception, their feeling, and even students don't know how to, most of them don't know how to express their feelings, ma'am.
That's absolutely right, ma'am. That is the reason we have to start at the first year. And we need to guide them. The thing is, we are not trained in reflective writing either. So we are not very sure about how much to reflect either.
Yes.
But I feel they have to go much more in depth and reflect about how they felt when they touched a particular tissue. Every single day, what they did. You know, like the deltoid muscle. It's not the textbook description, but what they felt when they touched the deltoid, what their feeling was on its origin or insertion, and so on. I'm just giving you an example, but they have to reflect much more in depth to be able to reflect in clinical practice later.
Yeah. But I think we need to train them more on reflective writing and reflection, ma'am. Because everywhere we are asking about reflection and feedback, they really don't know how to give a feedback or reflection, and we also don't know what which part to pick in that. So
because it is subjective and there is nothing right or wrong in it. Anjali ma'am has actually posted in chat section, we need to have key or answers while assessing. No, there is no, essentially you don't need a key answer. It's the student's reflection. You just have to tell them how much in depth they need to reflect. And Anjali ma'am has also asked, do we tell the students how we will assess? Absolutely. We need to tell them how we assess.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
From any other participants?
I would like to just add a little bit to this in reflections. What I want to say is, what I have gathered in this past year, 1 year in 2019-20 batch, it is not necessary that they always tell about their feelings. it is not just what they are feeling, but what they have learned. So what all went, like when we are talking about straight deltoid, even on that we can ask them to write a reflection. So they will just say what all was taught in the class and how it was taught maybe. So they can give their views about how it was taught also, whatever they want to write, what happened, like that is exactly what happened in the
रेखा
class.
फक्त PPT शेअर करायला.
Necessary that they just write about their feelings, whatever they have learned, that also they can write in reflections, and how they are going to incorporate this learning in future on patients. So it is not just feelings. Reflections is not just about their feelings about what happened, but actually what they have learned and how they are going to use it in future as an Indian medical graduate.
Hina ma'am, absolutely right. What they learned, that is very important. How the cadaver or dissection helps them to learn the subject anatomy and how they are going to use it on patients. You're right, ma'am. Dr. Seema has raised her hand. Dr. Gokula Priya has raised her hand. If you all want to respond, ask questions.
Ma'am, can I read one question for you? How
Yes, ma'am.
we should ask the students for reflection? This was there in the chat box.
Yeah, it's not like there is a limit to reflection. Don't we reflect in everyday life? It's not just about reflection of the subject. It's about daily life. This is a lifelong learning skill. It's not something that is taught. The student has to learn by themselves. As much as they can reflect, but if we need to assess, it would take a longer time for the faculty to assess. So if we are not interested in assessing the students, we can ask them to reflect on every teaching learning activity, in fact. Praveen sir has mentioned in the chat box, the emphasis in reflection is not only the facts, but learning, feelings, and application in future. This is exactly what Dr. Hina mentioned as well.
Thank you, madam. Now I hand over the session.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Dipti Shastri ma'am, for solving all the queries of the attendees. I now call upon...
Ma'am, can
I... yes, Dipti ma'am.
No, not me. Somebody else.
Who wants to speak? Dr. Seema, do you want to speak?
Hello? Yes. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, ma'am. Continue.
Audible? There is some audio. I had a question for Dr. Dipti Shastri.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
We can hear you. We can hear you, ma'am. Continue, please.
Maybe I'll type it in the chat box.
Okay,
that would be...
Okay, ma'am. No problem.
Yes, ma'am. I'll respond on the chat box.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am. I'll respond on the chat box.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, Dipti Shastri ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
So I now call upon Dr. Charushila Shinde to introduce to us our today's second esteemed guest. Over to you, Dr. Charushila ma'am.
Hello, am I audible? Hello.
Yes, you are audible.
Hello. Good afternoon, one and all. Myself, Dr. Chande, Associate Professor at MGM Anatomy Medical College, Mumbai. It's great pleasure to introduce our second speaker, Dr. Praveen Iyer, sir. Welcome, sir.
Charushila ma'am. The screen, please.
Hello.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Now continue, please.
Currently, sir is additional professor of anatomy at the said GS Medical College, Mumbai.
Sir received the gold medal in MD Anatomy at Mumbai University in 2006. Sir is holding the position as a convener, National Medical Commission Nodal Center for the Faculty Development at GS Medical College and KM Hospital, and co-director for the GS Medical College Femur Regional Institute. Sir is the member of NMC Task Force implementation of the competency-based UG curriculum for the second year MBBS onward, and uploading the yearly timetable on the respective college website. Sir was Assistant Editor Journal of Postgraduate Medicine from 2012 to 2016. Sir was the member of MCI Expert Group implementation of the competency-based UG curriculum for the first year MBBS and uploading yearly timetable on the respective college website. Sir published 2 chapters in a book named The Art of Teaching Medical Students. Total 13 publications, 7 in international journal and 6 in national journals to in his credit. Thank you. Please continue. Praveen sir, please continue.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Charushila. Firstly, please confirm if I am audible.
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Sir, you are audible.
Yeah, thank you. So I will now be sharing my screen. Okay, please let me know if it is visible.
It's visible.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay, thank you. So I got a feedback that the screen is visible. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for staying on. And it's really a pleasure to be a part of this webinar, twin webinar, begun very well by Dr. Deepthi in the form of the session on reflections. And now I'm here to deliver a webinar on blueprinting in anatomy for competency-based medical education. Right at the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Anjali Sabnis, Professor and Head Department of Anatomy at MGM Institute of Medical Sciences, and the whole team at MGM for inviting me for this particular webinar. And it's really a pleasure to be here. I would also like to acknowledge our Dean, Dr. Hemant Deshmukh, our Dean Academics, Dr. Natkar, our Professor and Head Department of Anatomy at GSMC, Dr. Pritha Bhuyan, Department of Medical Education at GS Medical College, and all my teachers and students who every day provide me, source of learning and inspiration. And through the learning that I have had, I'll be sharing the learning that I've had even in this topic on blueprinting to you all. So just for those who may not have seen our medical college, just few glimpses. The picture on the left is the entrance to the medical college. Picture on the right is the entrance to the hospital. And there are multi-storied buildings within the campus. Still, maintained some greenery within the campus. So that's really nice to be a part of this institute. And this is the Department of Anatomy on the second floor of the college building, and the views through the corridors of our department. Right at this point in time, with reference to blueprinting, I'll request the host to just release the polls. There will be 4 polls that I request all the participants to just attempt the polls, and then maybe after 30 seconds, the host can release the result of the poll.
Praveen sir?
Yeah, can we release the result? Stop
Yeah.
the poll and release the result one by one.
The first question. Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay, so this is a nice result out of 69 people who have attempted. 38% feel that all need to prepare the blueprint. Yeah, thank you. So let's go to the next question. Okay, can we have the results? Okay, a whopping 92% feel that it should be at the beginning of the academic year when the blueprint should be prepared. Thank you. Let's move to the third question. Yeah, I think we can stop and release the result. Okay, again, it's 92% that feel that for both theory and practical exam, blueprinting should be prepared. Okay, and the last question, please, of this particular cycle of opinion poll. Okay, can we get the results? Fine. So 25% people feel that should be prepared only for the summative examination, and the majority feel that it should not be only prepared for summative examination. Fine. Thank you very much. Thank you to all for attempting the poll. This gives us a fair idea of what all of us feel regarding blueprint with respect to these 4 questions, and we'll be throwing and discussing more on these aspects and other aspects of blueprint in the next few slides to come. So what the learning objectives are for this particular session? All of us shall be able to explain the purpose of blueprinting and apply principles of blueprinting while planning and executing assessment in anatomy for CBMA curriculum. What will be discussed over the next few minutes will be concepts of blueprinting in the form of what is blueprinting, what is the need and purpose, so why blueprinting is required, when should blueprinting be done with regards to timing, who should do blueprinting, and then how blueprinting should be done. We'll look at a few steps, and of course this being something which is technical, there will be challenges, and we'll try and look at if there are ways to overcome these challenges, if any. So all of us are aware of blueprint. We have seen such diagrams of blueprints, especially with the architects who prepare the plan for various kinds of buildings, houses, commercial spaces, etc. And we are familiar with such kind of diagrams. So same thing applies even for blueprinting with reference to assessment. What it is a detailed plan. It provides us a template for construction. Now, when we say construction here, we mean construction of assessment or examination. It helps define the purpose and scope of assessment that we are using. It also helps to specify weightage to be given to various elements as a part of the assessment. And it also helps us to decide content area topics, the various domains of learning that are to be assessed, and depending on the domains of learning that are chosen to be assessed, the appropriate assessment methods. So that's what blueprinting is. Now, if we consider, is blueprinting the need of the hour? Is it required? Let's look at this example of this elephant and people who are so-called blind men. When we say blind men, here we can liken these blind men to people or team who are responsible for constructing the assessment or designing the assessment. I am referring to them as exam constructor. Then people or a team of people who are going to assess the examinees or the students, the examinees themselves. These are the people who will be looking at the assessment, or the other stakeholders of assessment. If we look at these people who are there in this picture, if assessment blueprint is not available, then what could happen is that the assessment may sound different to different people or different stakeholders. So therefore, there may not be an alignment with what is intended to be assessed from what is actually assessed. So to bring in that alignment between the learning outcomes or the competencies in this particular situation which we are talking about in CBME, and aligning those competencies with subsequently specific learning objectives, the teaching learning methods which are appropriate, and the assessment methods which are appropriate, we will require the concept of blueprinting. So that's what is the need of blueprinting, to bring in that constructive alignment. So what is the role of blueprinting? It provides a reference framework for the exam constructor. Now, I am using the word here, exam constructor or designer. I have purposely not used the word just paper setter, because in the poll, we got that blueprinting has to be done not only for theory examination, but also for practical examinations, as all of you believe. So therefore, this exam constructor is the one who designs the entire assessment, not only theory, but also the practical and viva. Now, what it also helps us is to follow the norms and guidelines which are laid down by the organizations which are responsible for assessment. Now, let's look at purpose of blueprinting. Firstly, we have looked at need, then role, and now we are looking at the purpose that is achieved by doing blueprinting. So, blueprinting helps us to describe in details the levels, topics, competencies which are defined in the curriculum. Now, we have got a curriculum document, the competency document, by the erstwhile Medical Council of India, and using that as a framework, we'll be able to describe in detail the levels, topics, and competencies, and how they will be measured or tested by the assessment. So that's the first purpose of blueprinting. The second purpose is blueprinting will provide guidelines for obtaining a representative sample of assessment tasks which are in congruence with the curriculum. Now, this is with respect to the content that we are going to assess, the level of difficulty that will be used in assessment, and also the various methods of assessment. So this is what we are going, blueprinting is going to provide us, because not everything that is there in the curriculum document can be taught. Not everything that is taught to the students can be assessed. So we need to have a representative sample of the assessment task. So this blueprinting will allow us to do that. And the subsequent test that we'll be using will assess parallel content apart from the content that has been assessed in a given particular examination. So coming back to the need of blueprinting, it will help provide transparency to everyone. Now, who are these everyone? The curriculum planners, the teachers, examiners, and students. Because as we all know, that there is a cycle which is always there, or you can say there is an educational spiral where the syllabus, which is broken down into various competencies and learning objectives, has to be aligned to the teaching learning methods and the assessment. So this is an educational spiral, and any change that happens in each of these components is going to have an impact on each other. So therefore, if you have blueprinting in assessment, it will provide transparency to everyone to look at all the aspects of the curriculum. Blueprinting will help in standard setting and quality assurance of assessment. It will help match various competencies with the course content and also choose appropriate assessment tool. By this, the possibility of hidden curriculum is greatly reduced. Now, when we say hidden curriculum, if everything is black and white on paper and every stakeholder is on the same thought process, then there will not be any ambiguity with reference to the examination. So right now what is happening and what is seen is, in spite of the fact that students are taking a lot of effort, many times it happens that they end up failing. So that should not happen. So blueprinting will help that. It also will help scientifically to reduce two major threats of what is the validity of assessment. One is what is called as construct underrepresentation, where if there are so many topics that have to be assessed, there may be too little weightage provided to a few topics. Blueprinting will help avoid that, to spread out the distribution. Secondly, the second threat to validity is construct irrelevance variance. Now, having the competency document in place, and if we are familiar with that, then it is possible to eliminate flawed questions. It is possible to eliminate or get a balance between too easy or too difficult questions, and it's definitely possible to eliminate examiner bias towards so-called favorite, hot, or trivial topics. We all have favoritism with respect to topics. So if we have blueprinting in place, all this can be avoided. So these threats to validity can be taken care of by blueprint. Now let's go to how to do blueprinting. So these are the steps in blueprint. 5 steps are listed in this particular slide. The first is to define the purpose and scope of assessment. Second is deciding weightage for the content, level, and assessment tool that is to be used. Thirdly is decide total weightage and number of items to be included in one assessment. Then prepare a table of test specifications and prepare individual questions. We'll go to them one by one. So firstly, looking at defining the purpose and scope of assessment. So what do we actually mean by this? What we mean is whether the assessment that we have planned is formative assessment or internal assessment examination or summative assessment examination. Now, depending on which assessment that we are looking at, the approach to blueprinting is going to vary accordingly. Then, when we look at purpose, we have to see which are the domains that are going to be assessed. If you look at domains, learning domains are classified as knowledge, skill, attitude, and now a separate domain has been added. All these years it was considered as a part of attitude and communication. Then we also need to look at what is the level of assessment that we need to do, or as per the Miller's pyramid that we are familiar with now, the ascendancy of competency. The base is formed by knowledge, that is knows. The second layer is formed by knows how, that is application of knowledge. The third layer is formed by what is called as shows how, that is using the application, demonstrating the various steps of complex procedures that a learner has learned, and finally independently doing it in the society and that being assessed. So these are levels of Miller's pyramid. So these also need to be considered when we define the purpose of assessment. And when we say scope of assessment, is primarily dealing with whether we are assessing an undergraduate or a postgraduate. Depending on that, the scope of assessment will vary. The second point is to decide weightage for the content level and decide the assessment tool. Now, how do we go about doing this? When we look at this particular aspect of or the step of prepare and blueprinting, it will be more useful for summative assessment. However, we also need to look at sampling of contents and the domains of learning. While looking at that, we need to make sure that we practice things that will make the assessment valid and also reliable. Now, as I said before also, there is all that is expected we are having in the form of the curriculum document. But all that is there cannot be taught, and all that is taught cannot be assessed in a summative assessment. So this point is primarily holding true for summative assessment. So therefore, we need to have a representative sampling. And of course, there are issues of time, logistics, and resources with every institute for conducting the assessment. So then now, how to sample the contents and decide the weightage? Let's look at it in the next slide. So if you look at our competency document that is provided by the Medical Council of India, the competencies are broken down into core competencies and non-core competencies for every discipline. So for anatomy also, they have been classified like that. So what do we mean by core competency? Core competency is a competency which a learner must learn and be assessed on. This is called as a traditional must know, and this is required for certifying the person as pass. Non-core competencies, which are called as a traditional nice to know, they are competencies which are listed, which have to be taught, which have to be assessed, but need not be certified, okay, in those competencies for them to be called as pass. So that is what is the difference as given in the MCI document. We also need to consider how much time we are spending on a given topic to teach the topic. So that will help us decide the weightage for that topic in an assessment. And then thirdly, we also need to look at what is the clinical application of the topic that is being taught to the students. Whether the topic has high clinical application, moderate clinical application, or no or little clinical application. So based on that, the weightage to that topic will be decided. Now, if you look at the assessment tool, we are familiar that there are the domains which will decide the assessment tool. Assessment of knowledge is done by written exam and viva voce. Assessment of skills, and here when I use the word skills, we are referring to skills which may be procedures, which will require demonstration of the steps. So that is assessed in the form of practical exam using either observation checklist in the form of OSCE, which is objective structured clinical examination, or objective structured practical examination, which is OSCE. And there is a term used in the MCI document which is called as skills assessment. Now, skills assessment will encompass all these things. When we have to assess attitude and communication, they can be assessed based on checklist or rating scale based on observation. So we need to observe either using a checklist or a rating scale and assess attitude and communication. So this will decide the tool of assessment. So we have looked at deciding the weightage and the assessment tool here. Now let's come to the last 3 points. Deciding total weightage, number of items to be included. When we say items, you can synonymously use them as questions. Secondly, we need to prepare what is called as a table of test specifications, which will give us at a glance which are the number of questions, which are the questions, which are the topics from where the questions are taken, and how many marks are awarded to each of those questions. And then finally, the last step is to prepare individual questions. Now, these 3 last points which I mentioned are generally done for individual assessment tool generally, but they can also be used for drafting a plan for the entire assessment, which includes all kinds of assessment tool. But generally, they are used for individual assessment tool, like say a written examination or a practical examination or a viva voce. Now, I'll be sharing an example, obviously, because the most commonly used thing is a blueprint for drafting a theory paper. So I'll be using example of blueprint for the theory paper. So first step was defining the purpose and scope of assessment. Let's look at drafting a theory paper for summative exam, that is university examination. Then deciding weightage to be given to content levels, and we have chosen the cognitive domain of learning because we are using written examination. So levels of cognitive domain, if we recall, as per Bloom's taxonomy, are 6 in number. However, the easier levels, the smaller, shorter levels are 3. Level 1 is recall, level 2 is understanding, and level 3 is problem solving. So we will use these 3 levels of assessment of cognitive domain. And of course, the method of assessment chosen is theory paper or written assessment. So let's look at example. So we are looking at these 3 steps now for the written examination. So as I said, topics which have no or little clinical application will be getting the least weightage. Moderate clinical application will get moderate weightage, and high clinical application will get the most weightage. So what we do then is construct a 2 or 3 dimensional matrix. So it will be composed of topics, which is in the form of content, then the levels of knowledge, the 3 levels that I just spoke of, and then the type of questions that we are going to ask in the theory paper. So I am using the skeleton of question paper as provided by Maharashtra University of Health Sciences because our college is affiliated to that university. So using this as a model, I'll be giving you an example. It has got paper 1 and paper 2, and each paper has got 3 sections. Section A is multiple choice questions for 20 marks, 20 questions of 1 mark each, of which 4 questions should be clinical application based. Section B is of 80 marks, which is composed of brief answer questions, any 10 out of 11, 2 marks each. Short answer questions, any 8 out of 9, 5 marks each. And for paper 1 here, what is given is that 1 short answer question has to be from 8Com module. That is, anatomy is given the charge of module 1.1 and 1.5. So 1 question has to be from either of these 2 modules. And the last is question 4 long answer questions, which is any 2 out of 3, 10 marks each. We also need to, when we draft actually the blueprint, we also need to look at the timing. So the timing allotted for section A is uniformly by MUHS 30 minutes. And then question 2, 3, 4 together is 2.5 hours. As say a person who is responsible for drafting a blueprint, we should look at and allocate timing for these questions as well while preparing the blueprint. So then we come to what is called as preparing a table of test specifications. So how do we go about it? Since we know that there are 3 types of questions that will be asked in the theory examination: long answer, short answer, brief answer, and multiple choice questions, we can try and look at the story of the full bucket. This is something like a teacher got a bucket which is filled with large stones and asked the students, tell me if this bucket is full. The students saw the bucket full to the brim with large stones, and naturally they said, yes sir, the bucket is full. Then what the teacher did was, these fine smaller stones the teacher got and put in the bucket, and they passed through the spaces in between the larger stones and occupied the bucket. The teacher asked the students, tell me, now is the bucket full? The students definitely said, yes sir, now it is definitely full. Then the teacher got sand and put the sand inside the bucket. The sand, being very fine, passed through the various spaces in between the larger stones and the smaller stones and occupied some space within the bucket. Again, the same question was asked by the teacher. The student said, yes, now so definitely it is full. And then the last thing that the teacher did was got water and poured on all the things, and the water found its own way to get its space within the bucket. So what this story tells us basically is, if anybody wants to unmute and tell the conclusion from this story, you can do that, please. Or you can also write on the chat box. Anyone would like to conclude from this story of the full bucket?
Yeah, can I say something? I'm
Yes,
Dr. Shashi Raheja
yes, please.
from retired from Lady Harding Medical College, now working at Dr. Baba Saheb. See, the first bucket is pebbles, like MCQs, the first one you are putting. Then are your long questions, and then your other questions, and the last one represents your attitude or
Last one
communicate
represents, madam?
attitude. That still there is a scope,
Okay, okay,
and your own thinking. I don't know.
okay, okay.
I could make out this only.
Yeah, thank you very much, madam. Thank you. Any other thoughts other than what madam has said? Okay, I'm seeing knowledge is endless, always scope for space, and there's time for everything. Fine, okay. So what it actually means is, now suppose the reverse was done. A bucket full of water would be there first, and then the other things were poured in that bucket. What would have happened? What would have happened is that the water would have spilled out of the bucket, isn't it? So what this tells us is that if we finish a lot of portion of the syllabus by drafting MCQs first in a question paper, then what will happen is there will always be a scope of overlap of the areas of syllabus. So therefore, the sequence that we need to follow, or we should follow, is we should start with long answer questions, then go to short answer questions of 5 marks each, then go to the brief answer questions, and finally go to MCQ. So the larger stones are long answer questions, the smaller stones are the short answer questions, the sand is brief answer question, and water is multiple choice question. Because this philosophy has to be followed to prevent overlap of contents. That's the conclusion from the whole story. Thank you. We'll go ahead. So let's look at a representative example of paper 1 of MUHS. Mind you, this is only representative, and this only gives us an idea how to go with the process of blueprinting. So how do we go about it? Now let's try and look at the table, how, and I'll explain the table to you first, what it means. This is paper 1 of anatomy as per MUHS pattern. On the left hand side, the column shows levels of cognitive domain. Here, the topics are written on the left hand side first column. Then the next 3-4 columns are MCQ, which is 1 mark each, BAQs 2 marks each, SAQs 5 marks each, LAQ 10 marks each. And then summary will be total marks and topic that is allotted. We'll be writing here. So topics of paper 1 allotted by the university are superior extremity, head, neck, central nervous system, embryology, general embryology, genetics, and systemic embryology, systemic microanatomy. Now, of course, this systemic embryology and systemic microanatomy are a part of the 3 gross anatomy topics. So including that particular regions, systemic embryology and microanatomy have to be asked here. So what do we do? Using the story of the bucket, full bucket, we'll first allocate marks to long answer questions. So that's the step that we'll do first. So this is how we have done it. So long answer questions we have chosen from the 3 major areas of gross anatomy available to us: superior extremity, head, neck, and the nervous system, that is neuroanatomy. So, and we have allocated level 1, level 2, level 3, that is recall, understanding, and problem solving. We know that LAQs are of 10 marks each, and it is 2 out of 3. So we need to set 3 LAQs. So we have allocated 10 marks to each LAQ from each of these 3 different regions. And we have also allocated the levels of cognitive domain, recall, understanding, and problem solving. So we have given 4, 3, 3 as the subdivisions of the 3 levels. So right now, by doing this, what has happened is we have awarded 30 marks. We have completed 30 marks allocation. The next we'll proceed with is SAQ and BAQ, and finally come to MCQ. So how do we go about that? We have done this way, that we have allocated 2 questions of superior extremity, so 10 marks, 5 into 2, 2 from head, neck, and 2 from neuroanatomy here, 1 from general embryology, 1 from genetics here for SAQ, and 1 from ATCOM module 1.1 and 1.5, which is mandatory. So it is 8 out of 9. So 9 questions we have allocated here. So this is 45 marks. Then coming to BAQs, we have allocated 2 questions from superior extremity, 1 question from head and neck, then 2 questions from the neuroanatomy, 2 questions from general embryology, 1 question from genetic, 1 from systemic embryology, and 2 questions from systemic microanatomy. That's how we have covered here. So here we have set 22 marks because one option is there, 2 into 11. And then finally coming to MCQ, we fill in the blanks to get a balance. So we have chosen 4 questions from superior extremity, 4 questions from head neck, 4 questions from neuroanatomy, 2 from general embryology, and 2 each from genetics, systemic embryology, and microanatomy. So that's making a total of 20. So this is how we have chosen as a representation for this particular blueprint. Now see what is happening with reference to the recall level of questions, the understanding level of questions, and problem solving level of what is the allocation of marks. In the next table, you will find that. And if you look at, of course, the summary here, 28 marks have been allotted to superior extremity, 26 to head neck, 28 to neuroanatomy, and then accordingly. So, and then you see systemic embryology and microanatomy.
Attendees only. Attendees only.
To the topics of gross anatomy. So that's how you'll get it. If we go to the next table, we'll get a summary of how many questions, how many marks are allocated for recall, how many marks are allocated for understanding, and how many are for problem solving. Now, in this particular example that I've shared, 60 marks are of recall questions. So 51.28%. When we say 51.28%, why it is so? Because questions in option also have been taken into consideration. So therefore, total of 117 marks questions we have set or allocated, and we have to calculate the percentage accordingly. 60 out of 117 is 51%. Then 31 out of 117 is 26%, and 26 out of 117 is 22%. Commonly, what is suggested in literature is for preclinical subjects, the ratio should be around 50% of recall, 25% of understanding, and 25% of problem solving a variety of questions. This is the general principle that literature gives us. Plus minus, we have just taken into consideration because all the time we may not be able to just fit into exact 50%, exact 25, and exact 25%. So we have given a range here, and that's how we follow the range. Anatomy is more of facts, but at the same time, it need not be restricted to recall because the whole philosophy of competency-based education is that ability to apply the facts that the student has learned. So we give considerable weightage to the understanding and problem-solving variety of questions as well, and that's how 50%, 25%, 25% has been arrived at even in literature. So we use this principle to construct a blueprinting for theory examination. Likewise, we can use for even the second paper and then, of course, the practical examination as well. Going a little step further, it looks very simple, the table, right? Because very larger topics are listed there. Even within the topics, say for example, gross anatomy of superior extremity, inferior extremity, thorax, abdomen, pelvis, head, neck, we can further classify them into questions from the area of skin, fascia, muscle, vessel, nerve, joint, bone, region, microanatomy, embryology, and miscellaneous if it doesn't fit into any of these for each of these areas. So thus we can make subdivisions of the topics, and even likewise we can create subdivisions for general anatomy, general embryology, general microanatomy, and genetics. So this can become even more exhaustive. What was shown was concise, and it can be elaborated even further. So likewise, what we have used for theory examination, we can use the same principles for constructing blueprint for practical and viva examination as well. But you will have $1 million question. How easy or difficult it is to do for practical examination. The easiness or the difficulty is based on the pattern of practical examination followed by various universities. If we look at anatomy as a subject, and if we look at the competencies that are listed for anatomy and how they are assessed, many competencies, even though they are assessed in practical examinations, are based on knowledge. So therefore, we end up assessing knowledge even in the practical examination and not demonstration of various steps that will involve complex procedures, because at the most what we are looking at in the practical examination is observing whether the student is able to identify a particular structure or not, and then we take that as a starting point and start asking questions pertaining to cognitive domain which the student answers. So therefore it will be very difficult for us again to construct a blueprint in practical examination. But if we keep that in mind and understand that what is being assessed even in the practical examination is knowledge, higher level of knowledge. Identification is considered as higher level of knowledge. It's what to say, it's a area where it is between knows how and shows how, you can say. If you look at the MCI document, identification of a structure in a soft part or on a bone is listed as shows how level in Miller's pyramid. So using that as a cue, we consider that as shows how level, but we need to prepare the blueprint accordingly. Shows how level is assessed in practical examination by observing whether the student identifies or not. So basically student is applying the knowledge and then identifying a particular structure. So labeled as shows how, but application of knowledge is what is done in the practical examination. So we will have to prepare a blueprint accordingly. We can go a little step further if we have spots for gross anatomy as well as a part of the examination, or if we have maybe stations where things can be observed if you are really observing. Like for example, competencies listed for anatomy are demonstrate the attachments of a particular muscle. Now when we say demonstrate the attachments of a particular muscle, if we are observing that particular thing in a student, whether the student is demonstrating, but even that is not actually a step of any procedure. So therefore it cannot be totally called as a shows how level or a performs level of the skill domain. So these are areas which people will have questions in mind. However, whatever principles we have used for blueprinting in the theory examination, the same can be used even for practical examination. And one question that I'm getting on the chat box is how to go about blueprinting for Viva. Viva is more of examiner centered. We'll come to this question when we look at challenges in blueprinting, and your question will be answered that there challenges. So once a blueprint is prepared, now the first question was who should prepare the blueprint, and I got a varied response. 38% of you had said out of 69 people who attempted that all people should prepare the blueprint. The faculty members, the department, the institution, the university. Okay. Now when we look at any of these, when we say faculty members, obviously we are faculty members. So we should prepare the blueprint. So when we prepare the blueprint as an individual activity, if at all, a blueprint is not complete or any tool is not complete without getting validated. So therefore, this validation has to be done by a group of 3 to 4 experts within our own subjects, that is Department of Anatomy, and those who have learned this technology of blueprinting or the science of blueprinting. You can take help of them even if they are not from our own department. So we will definitely learn the technology, but we also can get the blueprint validated from experts outside our own subjects as well, just to have a third party input. Now we come to challenges in blueprinting. Blueprinting is a laborious and tedious task. Definitely you will agree, because you have seen this table and even subtables if you want to create and distribute, allocate the questions. It is, yes, a tedious task. For anatomy particularly, because we are talking for our own subject, anatomy is a discipline that is predominantly knowledge oriented. Everyone will definitely agree this. Hence, there is repetition of knowledge assessment of the same content in theory and practical examinations most of the time. Example, I'll just give you identification of a muscle in the soft parts, and then we ask, tell me the attachments, nerve supply, actions, etc., etc. So again, the same thing could have been asked even in the theory examination. Okay, so it's basically repetition of knowledge assessment of the same content that many a times happens. Now, theory paper moderation, which we'll refer to as validation, is done as an individual activity rather than a group of experts in universities. Probably this is for maintaining confidentiality and maybe it's a rules and regulations, so that's why it is done. So we might have to move away from this single person business just to bring in more validity to our assessment. Then the pattern of practical examination, Viva examination, does not probably permit prior planning by the group of examiners appointed. Rather, we face situations where examiners are changed even at the 11th hour of the exam. So this is a big challenge for us. So this is probably preventing or not permitting us prior planning and preparing a blueprint for Viva OC examination. If this is permitted or this we take care of it, it's not a question of not getting permitted. Because of issues other than this, we end up that the examiners who are assigned, they do not communicate with each other for planning for the Viva OC examination. If that is done, then of course blueprinting can be done for the particular Viva OC. Then we will all agree not all of us are adequately having faculty development in concepts like blueprinting. So inadequate faculty development is a challenge, and probably there's also resistance in applying the principles of blueprinting, starting from we ourselves, that is faculty ourselves, then maybe at department level, maybe at institution level as a policy, and also even at university level, maybe as a policy. So there might be resistance which might be a challenge in implementing blueprint. So how do we overcome these challenges? Is there a possibility? Let's look at it. So we can arrange faculty development programs. We can arrange in-house faculty development programs for our own department faculty members, discuss them out. We may not call ourselves, the gold standard in blueprinting, etc. But we can definitely discuss amongst ourselves and come to a consensus, so that thereby conducting faculty development. We can start with baby steps individually as a faculty. So it may not become a departmental policy overnight, or an institutional policy overnight, or a university policy overnight. But we imbibing the concept of blueprinting and start to implement when we get an opportunity of planning and assessment within our department. That will be the baby step. Then moving a step further is make a departmental policy. Have multiple blueprints for the multiple assessments that we conduct at department level, and get these blueprints validated by multiple faculty using the principle of experts in the subject and a third party review by experts who are non-subject experts. Then university must develop blueprints which are multiple blueprints for both theory and practical examinations, and introduce validation by more than one expert. If this happens, obviously, we may prepare blueprints, but unless they get validated by more than one or two people, the blueprints may not really serve the purpose they really want to serve the purpose of. So these are the ways we can overcome challenges. Classify the competencies that warrant assessment in formative, internal, and summative assessment examinations, and also those that may be assessed repeatedly. Now, when we say that we need to classify the competencies, there will be many competencies that will be assessed not only in internal assessment, they will be repeated in the summative assessment as well. So there's nothing wrong in it, but we need to classify that there are a few set of competencies that will be repeated, but there will be other sets of competencies which have already been assessed in internal assessment examination and day-to-day formative assessment examinations. So the entire list of competencies cannot be assessed by summative. That's why we are wanting to sample it out, and that's the whole concept of blueprinting for summative assessment. Then classify the competencies which are listed in the document that are going to be assessed in theory and practical examinations separately. This will avoid duplication of assessment. So not only that they are duplicated in internal assessment and summative assessment in the theory examination, if we do not classify the competencies into those assessed in theory and practical separately, they will get duplicated even in the practical exam. So therefore, these are two things that we need to do, and then go ahead with the steps of blueprinting. We will get a very robust blueprint for our assessment, definitely. Now I'll request the host to share the opinion poll number 5.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, can we stop and share the results? Okay, whopping 85% feel that yes, exam blueprint should be shared with the students. Yes, and I will ask those people who have said no for giving reasons for surely. But as we all know, there are two statements that I have read, and one statement everybody will be familiar, that it is assessment which is the engine that drives learning. Everybody agrees to that. So therefore, that's how students are going to learn. But of course, in the current scenario, people also have the concept of learning drives assessment, etc. So that also is there. So not to discount this particular statement also. But there is another statement that I came across is that assessment is the tail that wags the dog. Okay, this is another thing. So whatever said and done, we cannot undermine assessment, and therefore whatever plan we prepare for assessment, it is always prudent to share with the students, because that is ultimately going to aid in student learning and not just student passing the exam also. So it's always better to share whatever we plan with the students so they are familiar and there is no pressure of performing in the examination. That's my personal feeling. So those people who said no, can we have reasons, if any? If anybody would like to share reasons why they said no. Okay, I don't see anyone. So I'll go to the next slide. So let's summarize. So in the last 30-35 minutes, what we have done is we have gone through the concepts of blueprinting. We looked at the need and the purpose of blueprinting. We looked at the timing when the blueprinting should be done. Ideally, we should plan the entire assessment at the beginning of the academic year itself. But if not done, at least make an effort to get the blueprinting done for each assessment before the examination. Who should do blueprinting? Each one of us should be involved in the blueprinting process. Once the blueprinting is done, we should get validated from a group of people. We should also get into picture a third-party view of the blueprint. Then we looked at the various steps in which we can go through the blueprinting process and looked at the challenges and ways to overcome them. As I go and thank all of you for patiently listening to me and interacting with me in this particular session, and move on to the question answer session. There is one question that I received on the chat box that I can see is, many universities have 10 marks questions for long answer. Very few have tried 15 marks questions. And what is your opinion? So if anyone has a thought on this. See, my opinion to this will be that lesser the number of marks, what will happen is wider the scope of addressing the topics of the syllabus. If we have more number of marks, what will happen is a particular topic will get that much more weightage for sure. If that is okay and that serves as a representative sample of the entire syllabus that is available to us, then even we can think of going with 15-mark questions. So maybe one 15-mark question, or maybe at the most 2 15-mark questions, and remaining 70 marks distributed among the other types of questions. So we can definitely think it all depends on what we feel. Will those questions be representative of the syllabus that is there? Because it's all a matter of the sample being representative. So I think that should be the criteria of thinking of introducing 15-mark question. It may be one 15-mark question also, but it all depends on not only that, but also the time which is required for students to answer the entire question paper as per the theory examination. So there are multiple factors that that need to be taken into account while deciding the weightage to a particular type of question. Yeah. So thank you very much, and back to organizers for the question answer session before we close.
Thank you, Dr. Praveen Iyer, sir, for such a wonderful, detailed explanation about the blueprinting. I would like now to call Dr. Sumi Elizabeth to conduct the question answer session.
Thank you, sir. It was a very well constructed and informative session. Now the session is open for questions. If anyone wants to raise a question, you can please.
There is one question that is from Dr. Yashoda, and she has asked how to do blueprinting for Viva.
Ma'am, that was answered by the sir, I guess.
Okay. Sorry.
Ma'am, I have a question.
Yes, please go ahead.
Sir, how exactly are you conducting MCQs for the summative in Maharashtra University? May I please know? Are you giving it as a separate question paper, or is it part of the main theory paper itself?
In the university exams, the multiple choice question paper is a separate question paper along with an OMR answer sheet, and that is collected after half an hour from the students separately, and then the students start attempting the remaining set of questions.
So you issue both the papers together, the main theory paper and the MCQ question paper, right?
The question paper of MCQ is given earlier, and 10 to 15 minutes later, the question paper of the remaining question paper is given to the student.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sir, there is one question from Dr. Raghu. He is asking, is the blueprint once prepared can be used for the next academic year also?
Yes. So this is a very nice question that you have asked. Whenever we indulge ourselves in a new process for the first time, we always would like to see the effect and the impact of that process through the year. So if we prepared a blueprint in this for this particular academic year and see how it works, we need to look at how it works. We need to take feedback from the stakeholders, from the students, from the teachers. We need to look at that. We need to look at what impact it has had on the learning, whether it has helped us in designing the learning activities, whether it has had an impact on the assessment of students itself, what is the impact on the results, what has happened, and we need to take even qualitative feedback from students as well as teachers. Looking into the feedback, we can decide whether it has worked or not worked and take it ahead. Because finally, it boils down to that only. If a blueprint plan is in place, it can be repeatedly used year after year. And therefore, I also said that no one blueprint is foolproof. So you need to have multiple blueprints available for a given exam also. For example, the blueprint that I shared for paper 1 here, I shared based on the fact that these are the questions, types of questions that should be there from these topics. Now, which subtopics of that particular topic may vary from exam to exam. So therefore, we can have multiple blueprints available with us. Yeah. Then the next question I'm seeing here is LAQ is structured. Should BAQ also be structured? Can you share the opinion? Okay. The answer to this will be, try to structure the questions as far as possible. More the structure given to the question, the clarity will be there both to the students as well as the assessor or the examiner. So then if both people are on the same page, it becomes a win-win situation for both people. Otherwise, it becomes difficult. Suppose if you have a question like describe or something, or just one word for a 5-mark question, then it's open to interpretation what is to be written. So therefore, it's always better to structure a question. Structuring may increase the number of pages of the question paper, but that should not deter you from structuring the questions. I feel even BAQ should be structured.
Dr. Sumi, you are muted yourself. Please unmute.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Do we have any more queries?
Okay. I'm seeing
Dr.
one question.
Sumi, I have one query for Praveen sir.
I'm seeing one question in the question answer section. Action to be taken against examiner not following blueprinting. Now, what action is to be taken will have to be the decision of the examining authority. There will be definitely be guidelines for the examiners not adhering to a particular pattern also, depending on the feedback received from the stakeholders. Say, for example, if you are looking at university examination, if the paper is set by a particular paper set right now in the current scheme of things, a paper setter is appointed and then a moderator is appointed, and then it goes through that process, there will be definitely those guidelines. So the similar guidelines will have to be followed in case the impact of the question paper is adverse on probably as suggested by the stakeholders, and whatever is the norm that is there, that the same norm can be followed. But if everything is clear on the on paper regarding the blueprint, I don't think so there will be any reason why an examiner will not follow the blueprint, because it is an aid to the examiner. So therefore, I think it will always be good. That's what will be my answer, sir.
Okay. So there is a query from Dr. Bhavna. Ma'am, please go ahead.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
You have clarified almost all the doubts. But when you gave us the example of paper 1, as I could interpret, your total of marks was coming to 117. That must be because we give a choice in LAQ and SAQ to our students. In our university also we do the same.
Yes.
But I was seeing MUH's dental papers. There they are not giving any option or choice to the students.
Okay.
And similarly, in some other universities for MBBS also they are not doing it.
Yes.
Sir, is it easier to create a blueprint if there is no choice given to the students? What is your opinion, sir?
Yeah, so that is up to the Board of Studies and Board of Examinations of the university to decide whether to give a choice or not to give a choice. But if the choice is given, then naturally those choice questions also we need to be considered as a part of the blueprinting exercise. So to give weightage and give the spread of weightage. If choice is not given, it becomes probably even more easier to allocate the marks in the blueprinting process. When choice is given, the question always comes. If we give that those many marks for that particular area, which may be left in option by the students, so all those things will crop up if a choice is given. So, I mean, my personal opinion will be that for professional courses there should be no choice. That's my personal opinion. But then it may not have a consensus amongst our own subject experts. So probably to take a right balance, I think the Board of Studies of various universities must have taken a decision of providing options, and other universities which believe and arrive at a consensus that for professional courses choice should not be there, I think they will be using that particular.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any more queries? So here I see there are no more queries, so I'm handing over the session to Dr. Bhavna. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Sumi. And thank you, Dr. Praveen Iyer, sir, for such a wonderful lecture. I will just remind all the attendees that we will be sending you a link for feedback soon. And here we come to the last but not the least of our part of webinar. That is the vote of thanks, and for which I hand over to Dr. Shantanu Malik. Sir, please continue.
Yeah, I'm audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. A warm and cherished afternoon to all of you on behalf of MGM Medical University. Me, Dr. Shantanu Malik, Assistant Professor. I feel it's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks and acknowledge the contribution of those who worked hard to make this webinar successful. A special mention to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Shashank Dalvi, Sir, Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Dr. Nitin Kadam, Sir, Honorable Director, Dr. Sudhir Kadam, Sir, Honorable Dean, Dr. G.S. Narsitti, Sir, and our HOD Madam, Dr. Anjali Sabnis. They were always being the catalyst that inspired us to do our best and stand as a pillar of power. With deep sense of appreciation, I thank our all loving teachers for their untiring efforts. I also want to thank the people who worked behind the scene to execute this event, Mr. Anil, Mr. Mukund, Mr. Suresh, with their audiovisual and IT department. I would also like to thank all other non-teaching staff to make today's webinar compatible in this COVID situation. Last but not least, I would like to thank our enthusiastic audience from different parts of India for their patient listening and wholehearted participations. And a special mention also to our privileged and honorable speakers, Praveen sir and Dipti ma'am. Your e-certificate will be mailed in few days after submission of your feedback. Thank you all of you. Be safe, be positive, and be happy.
Dr. Bhavna?
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for attending the webinar and making it very successful. So we are ending it here. We have sent you the feedback link and also posted the video link. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Now we are concluding. Thank you.
आ रहा है क्या फीडबैक लिंक?
शांतनु सर को बोलना पड़ेगा कि सर ये सब पे डिफाइन टीम पॉजिटिव रहती है, लोग डरते हैं टीम पॉजिटिव।
हाँ, अभी पॉजिटिव नहीं। लिंक कहाँ नहीं आता है? हाँ, क्यों नहीं आ रहा है? पर कुछ नहीं आ रहा। मैं वही देख रही हूँ ना सर, मेरे को कुछ नहीं दिख रहा है। हाय रामा, कंटाळा आला। अच्छा। आ रहे। अपनी तरफ से भी भर देना है क्या फीडबैक? भर देते हैं ना, उसमें फीडबैक हो जाए। आया चैट में आया। दोनों लिंक आए देखो, तो यूट्यूब का लिंक भी आया है। not to give feedback because it is ours, but today both sessions were very good. Absolutely.
मुझे तो नहीं आया मैम. Where did you get? हाँ अभी नहीं है, मेरे बाहर आ गई थी. कॉल आया ना तो उसके लिए. मैम आप वो लिंक मेल कर सकते हो.